Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel for Craft World, Eldar.com. I'm Brent, and this is the unit focus video on Swooping Hawks and also Baharroth, aka the Cry of the Wind, aka the Swooping Hawk Phoenix Lord, aka Sexy Pants McCool Chicken, who is the youngest Phoenix Lord and tragically prophesied to eventually die the final death when fighting Slaanesh in the Rana Dandra. But between now and then, he is cacawing his way around the battlefields of the 41st millennium and has so much to offer in 10th edition Warhammer 40k, as do Swooping Hawks. This is a fabulous unit. My last unit focus video was about a solidly B-list unit. Hawks are a solidly A-list unit, and Hawks with Baharroth are one of the best tools in the current Eldari competitive arsenal. Despite the fact that a recent rules update has closed a loophole which let them do something particularly cool in one of the detachments that I won't tell you about so as not to disappoint you, that it is no longer available, but they remain excellent. And I'll also just say that Swooping Hawks have a special place in my heart because they're the first Aspect Warriors I ever bought back in the day when I was a middle school nerd who was getting into the game at a time when pewter models still came in blister packs. And my second trip to the game store involved picking up Baharroth and 4 metal Swooping Hawks. And bizarrely, that model was still current from the time I was in middle school until just a few months ago, which is crazy. Wait, am I doing like the cooking blog thing where I'm like, I'll tell you the recipe, but first, let me tell you about how I encountered this tasty hawkwing delicacy for the first time when my great-grandfather Fezziwig McBeak Muffin asked his new wife to make him something special, and my aunt later found it pressed between the pages of Colonial Ankles Monthly, only to then make it for my 6th birthday party or something. Sorry, I won't do that. But if you are interested in my early days in the hobby and how I came to it, I will link the video in the description in which I talk about that and also show off the collection. But Hawks do have a special place in my heart for that reason, even though Banshees are my current favorites. Hawks are my old flame. All right, let's do the thing. In these videos, I talk about what the unit is, its role on the table, obstacles to using it effectively, and how best to play around those obstacles. And Swooping Hawks in and of themselves serve 2 functions. One is that they're an incredibly maneuverable scoring piece. So they get around the map very effectively to perform secondaries and maybe jump on primaries in the late game when there's not enough stuff to just shoot them off of objectives and left on the table. But then the other thing that they do for you is provide decently potent volume of fire that's effective into light infantry. But then the other thing they do for you is provide access to the grenade strat and also a datasheet power, which in combination with the lethal hits ability on their high rate of fire anti-infantry weapons allows them to multi-class into putting chip damage on anything. So they're a super quick scoring unit that's cheap enough to sacrifice it to score and also to move block. But then they're a legit shooting threat into light infantry, which because they can sort of like jump into your opponent's backfield at times can be pretty powerful. Because you can eliminate one of your opponent's units that's just there to do secondaries and be hard to reach. But then also they have this chip damage thing. They're good in combination with other stuff, which we'll talk about. But then if you have Baharroth leading them, especially if you run a large squad, they become even more maneuverable and one of the most maneuverable units in the entire Eldari Codex. And in addition, become fierce damage dealers that can threaten. They become an expensive tool when you use them that way. But oh my goodness, are they potent. The meanest murder chickens this side of the Eye of Terror. They're so good. Okay, let's look at the data sheets. So the basic unit of Hawks is 85 points, which is quite reasonable for Space Elves. They have the standard Aspect Warrior stat line, but they've got a 14-inch move because Swooping Hawks, and so T3, a 4-up save. They have the lighter aspect armor with the 5-up invuln, 1 wound on the regular Hawks, 2 wounds on the Exarch, and then the 6-up leadership and the 1 OC. They each carry a las blaster, and this is because back in like second ed, when these models were introduced, different factions were pulling from the same ward gear largely, and everybody had las guns. So these used to be las guns, but now they're las blasters. The las blaster has a 24-inch range, which is good for an Eldari small arms fire weapon, and it's has 4 attacks, which is great. Hitting on 3s, strength 4, very nice, and some other additions they've been a 3. No AP, sad. 1 damage, but they've got assault and they've got lethal hits. So all of your 6s to hit will automatically wound the target, which, because they put out so many shots, means they can often put some chip damage on a pretty hard target. Now, in addition, you can either give the Exarch a las blaster, a scatter laser, the Hawk's Talon, or a power sword and a sun pistol. If you give them the Exarch las blaster, it also has assault and lethal hits. It's just like the regular one, except it's strength 5 with -1 AP instead of 4 with a 0 AP, and that's good. I also like the las blaster, which puts out 4 shots. I'm sorry, the Hawk's Talon, which puts out 2 shots, but at strength 6 -2 flat 2. So that one's good into Space Marines. It also has lethal hits, but it doesn't have assault, which is a bit of a shame. Or the scatter laser, right? 36-inch range, 6 shots, strength 5, no AP. I don't love the scatter laser because the real advantage of the scatter laser, I think, is the additional range, and you kind of want the whole squad to be in range, I think, if you're going to be using them as a shooting build. And then the sun pistol is crap. It's 2 shots at strength 4 with no AP, 12-inch range, but you get a power sword, which has 5 attacks at strength 4, -2 AP, 1 damage. I don't think you ever do this because you really don't want your Swooping Hawks bound up in melee. I mean, maybe there's an argument if you're running with the Phoenix Lord, who all of the Phoenix Lords are good hybrid characters. They all have good melee and good shooting. But my pick here is either the Exarch las blaster or the Hawk's Talon with the low rate of fire. The nice thing about the Hawk's Talon with the low rate of fire is the aspect shrine tokens. Remember those? Once per battle for each 5 models in the unit, you can change an aspect token to be an unmodified hit or wound of 6, so you can auto wound with the Hawk's Talon against some hard target and push through -2 AP, 2 damage, take it right to the saving throw. But they're both good. In addition, Swooping Hawks have the grenade keyword, and they obviously fly. So they can throw grenades like you usually would with the grenade strat, where you pick a nearby target and you roll 6 dice and every 4 up does a mortal wound. But they also have the grenade pack flyover ability. Once per turn in your movement phase, when this unit is set up on the battlefield or ends a normal advance or fallback move, it can use this ability. If it does, select 1 enemy unit within 8 inches and visible to this unit and roll a d6 for each Swooping Hawk model in the unit. And so if it's a squad of 5 Hawks, that's 5 dice, and every 4 up inflicts a mortal wound, which is really good. Particularly because there's nothing to prevent you from using the grenade pack flyover and still using the grenade stratagem elsewhere on the table. There is a line that prevents you from using the grenade pack flyover and then also throwing a grenade, which is fair enough, but it doesn't cost a CP to use the grenade pack flyover. You don't actually have to jump over the unit like you have had to in some other previous editions, which can be tough. And this is a powerful combo if you also have some fire dragons that can throw a grenade. Probably your fire dragons are not going to be near the thing your Swooping Hawks are shooting, but they might. An Autarch leading some Banshees gives the Banshees the grenade keyword, and because they're pretty quick on their feet, that is pretty powerful. If you're playing with Guardian Blobs, they can do it. But double grenades against something is a powerful combo. And if you have the big unit of 10 Hawks, you're rolling a lot of dice. The big unit of 10 Hawks is putting out an average of 5 mortal wounds, which is pretty great, especially if you can then drop another 3 mortal wounds on something with another grenade strat. So targets that have invulnerable saves really hate this. Now, Swooping Hawks also have Deep Strike, and you'll notice that the way the grenade pack ability is phrased, it's specifically to prevent you from deep striking and using the ability, right? Because you have to come in outside of 9 inches, and the grenade pack ability is within 8. But nevertheless, it often will make sense to hold a unit of Swooping Hawks. If you're running basic Swooping Hawks, a basic 5 elf squad of Swooping Hawks, it makes sense to start one in reserve just to help you with secondaries, right? It's this unit that can pop up anywhere on the board and help either do an action or just be in that board quadrant. And they've got pretty good range, so they can probably ding something. And again, they're cheap enough that if you have to sacrifice them to score, it's kind of fine. Not ideal, but fine. But if you run them with Baharroth, the chicken in chief, they become fearsome and terrifying indeed. First of all, they no longer, if they're running with Baharroth, they no longer need to come in outside of 9 inches when they come in from Deep Strike. They can come in outside of 6, which means they can use the grenade pack ability. Furthermore, Baharroth's Cloud Strider ability lets you pick up the Hawk unit that he's leading and put it back into strategic reserve at the end of your opponent's turn. So if Baharroth is leading your Hawks, every single turn of the game, you can, if your opponent goes first especially, you can pick them up, put them into strategic reserve. On your turn, drop them within 8 inches of an enemy unit, grenade it with the grenade pack ability for no CP. And if this is a big unit of Hawks, do an average of 5 mortal wounds to the thing. You don't roll an extra die for Baharroth because he weirdly does not have the Swooping Hawk keyword, even though he has the Aspect Warrior keyword and the Fly and Jump pack, and he's clearly a Swooping Hawk. But he doesn't carry grenades. He's above that. But the other thing he does is that when units are being set up on the battlefield in that way, so when they're like coming in out of reserve, and he can take them back into reserve every turn, all of his attacks automatically wound anything they hit, all of his shooting attacks, because he has lethal hits. And this Cry of the Wind ability means that all of Baharroth's hits are critical hits. So that gives him, because his shooting weapon has lethal hits, he'll always wound anything he hits. And then it's possible in an aspect host to also have him get sustained hits, which we'll talk about later. But this adds some extra oomph to the big squad of Murder Hawks, and we'll take a quick look at Baharroth's shooting weapon just to see how this works. So it's a souped up version of the regular Hawk weapon with 4 attacks at ballistic skill 2 up, strength 6, -1 AP, flat 2 damage, and it's got assault and lethal hits, the Fury of the Tempest. That's really good. It has the best things about both the Exarch Las Blaster, the higher rate of fire, but also the best things about the Hawk's Talon, the better AP and damage, and the fact that it just automatically wounds everything that it hits gives that whole squad additional play into hard targets and heavy infantry. So if you bring the whole squad in out of Deep Strike next to some hard target and you open up on it after the movement phase in which you did an average of 5 mortal wounds, you're going to shoot it 44 times, and all of Baharroth's hits will wound. And if you've got the Exarch with the Las Blaster, you could always, or Hawk's Talon, excuse me, you could use a token to guarantee another one, or you could do that on Baharroth if he misses with one, because you can use those tokens after the dice are rolled, the Aspect Shrine tokens. And then all of the regular 6s to hit are, of course, going to wound. And this can make it possible for a unit that otherwise would not have been a big threat to a hard target to become a big threat to a hard target, especially if you've included a Warwalker in the list in reserve. Because Warwalkers not only can carry a couple of heavy weapons at a reasonable cost, but also they give everything else that shoots the thing that they're shooting -1 AP. And this is very powerful in combination with volume of fire Hawks, because now you have somewhere around 7 lethal hits coming from the regular Hawk weapons that are going to auto wound, and then when you actually roll to wound with the other hits, you'll get some more, and all of Baharroth's hits auto wounded, and maybe you used an Aspect Shrine token, and Baharroth's hits are flat 2 damage. So on top of the 5 mortal wounds you probably already did to the thing, if you're now forcing a bunch of other armor saves with 1 to 2 AP doing 1 to 2 damage, this suddenly becomes a unit that can blow up a tank. Now would be a good moment to mention this video's co-sponsor, because if you want to know exactly how many wounds you're likely to do, you could download the Adept Roll app, which is a pocket 40K calculator that does exactly this sort of thing. You put in like 44 shots at strength 4 that have lethal hits, rerolling 1s into a T12 target with a 3-up save, and it will tell you exactly what the math is for that. And it'll tell you what the math is if you have Baharroth, or if you don't have Baharroth, or if you use the Warwalker or you don't use the Warwalker. And it all stops being muddy guesstimations, and that is pretty awesome. It's also not expensive. So big shout out to the Adept Roll app, which you can find in the Google Play Store, or you can go to the Adept Roll website. And special thanks again to Adept Roll for co-sponsoring this video. Okay, back to Hawks. So we're imagining that you have Baharroth leading a unit of 10 Hawks, which turns this into not only an incredibly mobile unit that potentially is good for scoring, although with Baharroth leading it, you probably don't want to be using it to do a lot of actions. You want it to be fighting because it becomes very expensive. Baharroth is 115 points, which is not bad for a Space Elf character, but then the 10 Elf unit of Hawks instead of the 5 Elf is 170. So we're at 285 if you have the Phoenix Lord and the 10 Hawks, and I think that is a reasonable cost for this tool. I really do. But there's nothing to stop you from deciding that you want to build a Hawk list and potentially running multiple 10 Hawk units. And even though you can't have a unit use the grenade pack stratagem and then throw a grenade, there's nothing to stop you from using the grenade pack stratagem for multiple units of Hawks. So if you had, for example, 3 units of 10 Hawks, and there have been lists by the way, that have done this in GTs, like 30 Hawks that all land next to something and do 15 mortal wounds to it before they shoot it 120 times with lethal hits. And if there is a Warwalker around, actual AP. And it also doesn't hurt to have some Shroud Runners in the list to strip cover. Now, speaking of units that have good synergy with big blocks of Murder Hawks, the Warp Spider Phoenix Lord is fantastic in combination with some Swooping Hawks as part of your Runs with Scissors battle group, which I've talked about in other videos. A fast group of elves that can get where you need it to be on an opponent's flank and do significant damage. The Phoenix Lord for the Warp Spiders has this ability that anything she shoots with her shooty weapons, your other elves will score critical hits against on a 5-up. So it doubles the output of lethal hits. And the Warp Spiders are fast enough to keep up with the Hawks, or the other way to think about it is the Hawks are fast enough to keep up with the Warp Spiders. So if there's something really tough that you want to put down, maybe even something like an Imperial Knight, the ability to shoot it with the Warp Spider Phoenix Lord and the other Warp Spiders in that unit to get the critical hits, and then to blast it with your Hawks that now all get lethal hits on 5s, and Baharroth, who's just automatically getting lethals, and then to charge in with the Warp Spiders and finish it off. You can take down something really big, especially in combination with that Warwalker in reserve. It's really good. And it's even better if you're running it in the Aspect Host, because it has crazy synergy with the Preternatural Precision Stratagem. So the Preternatural Precision Stratagem lets you, for 1 CP, give a unit of Aspect Warriors either ignores cover or sustained hits 1 or lethal hits. But if you spend an Aspect Shrine token, you can give them 2 of these things. Now your Hawks already have lethal hits, but for an Aspect Shrine token, you could also give them ignores cover and sustained hits 1. If you're running in combo with the Warp Spider Phoenix Lord, now all of your Hawks, a third of their shots are automatically wounding and generating an additional shot. And Baharroth is automatically wounding with every shot and generating an additional shot with every shot. And it's all ignoring cover, or I think you can not spend the Aspect Shrine token and just choose one thing. So if the target's out in the open, you just get the sustained hits 1, which is also fantabulous. Sorry to use some sort of American middle school girl lingo from the aughts. I don't know what's wrong with me. But anyway, this is a really powerful combo, and I also like it because it just has traditional Eldari flavor, the overlapping buffs, where you're like, I'm going to give one buff with the Phoenix Lord, and now I'm going to use this stratagem for my aspect hosts to do the other thing, to create a symphony of elven murder. It's very Eldari. And I've said before, the one thing I miss about the 10th edition Eldari playstyle is there are fewer of those opportunities than there have been in the past. So this one is, I especially like this one. Okay, lastly, we should talk about the rest. But lastly, before I talk about obstacles to using them effectively, we should talk about the rest of Baharroth's data sheet. So he's got that 14-inch move because he's a swooping hawk. At toughness 3, it's the standard Phoenix Lord, right? 2 up save, 4 up invuln, 5 wounds, 6 leadership, 1 OC. Cool. And then in addition to the pretty cool shooting weapon that's really only pretty cool because of the automatic lethal hits out of Deep Strike, he's got this melee weapon that doesn't suck. It's called the Shining Blade. It has 6 attacks. It hits on 2s. It's strength 5. Nice. So wounds heavy infantry on 3s. -2 AP. Flat 2 damage. Good into Marines. And sustained hits 1. So he attacks 6 times, and on average he'll hit 6 times because he'll miss once, but he'll roll a 6. It's a solid melee profile. That said, I don't think you're going to be using it a ton, except maybe as cleanup in the late game, in large part because you don't want your hawks to end up bound up in melee. And oftentimes they're going to be using the Cloud Strider ability and coming in out of Deep Strike, in which case they can't charge anyway. And the rest of the hawks don't have particularly good melee. And the fact that he has a melee weapon, I don't think makes it worth giving up basically all the shooting on your Exarch to take a power sword. You're really better off just having a decent shooting weapon. Now, you might, in the later part of the game, want your hawks to... you might find yourself using the sword to charge onto an objective in the late game. So you make the 14-inch move with the hawks. They shoot a thing, they throw a grenade, and then you need extra movement from the charge maybe to blast a unit off of an objective. And the decent melee profile on the Phoenix Lord can be really helpful for that. And then the other hawks, I mean... Aspect Warriors' sheer volume of attacks can make those other attacks kind of not totally useless, even though they don't really have melee weapons. The other nice thing about this sword, the decent melee profile on the sword, is it's a deterrent. It makes your opponent less likely to want to run in with some character with a decent melee weapon that's nevertheless not like a monster and kill a bunch of hawks if there's a competent melee fighter who is likely to survive to put that enemy character down. But generally speaking, your hawks are not a melee unit, which is why I don't like the Sun Pistol sword combo on the Exarch. But definitely don't forget it's something they can do, especially for late game objective control. Okay, obstacles to using hawks effectively. There's one obstacle to using hawks effectively, and that is their extreme fragility. At the end of the day, they're space elves with T3 and 1 wound and a 4-up save that could be a 3-up in cover. They've got that 5-up invuln, which is nice if somebody shoots you with low rate of fire, brutal weapons. But generally speaking, that's not the thing. And also, every time you lose a hawk, the squad becomes that much less effective. The grenade ability gets less effective because it cues off the number of hawks in the squad. And you lose out on 4 shots. Unlike the warp spiders, for example, whereas, as long as you've got the Exarch combat package, it's still really good. Hawks really do, as a combat unit, they suffer from losses significantly, any losses. So playing around this requires 3 things. 1, be smart about Overwatch. This is just a don't be stupid thing. Look for weapons that your opponent has that either hit automatically with the torrent keyword or have very high rate of fire or can hit on 5s for Overwatch or something, and don't land your hawks in an overwatchable position by those weapons. Or if you're going to, make sure to use Flitting Shadows, the battle focus ability that lets you decide you will not be overwatched. Thing number 2 is be smart about knowing how far your opponent's units can move and look at the board. Does your opponent, depending on where you put your hawks, right, when you take those shots, does your opponent have anything that's going to be able to get a bead on the hawks, which represents a significant threat? Usually you'll be able to bring them in on like a board edge or behind some piece of terrain such that not much in your opponent's army can shoot them. In a war host, they can fire and fade, which makes them also very good in a war host. But of course, in any build, they can fade back with an agile maneuvers token after they've been dinged, which is not a bad idea. But this really leads us into the third way to play around the fragility of hawks, and that is to take a page from James Kelling, aka Boone, over at Goonhammer, and don't do a thing just because you can do a thing. If you're doing the big, expensive hawk build with the chicken and chief, then that's too expensive a unit to trade for dinging an Imperial Knight real hard on turn one. You need to keep it alive. So, maybe in the early turns of the game, first couple turns, you don't choose the targets that you would most like to hit. You choose the targets that you can hit and stay alive having hit. Your hawks have a pretty healthy range at 24 inches, which should make it possible, again, sort of get some clever beads and screen them. Oh, the other thing you can do, hawks have a high enough rate of fire in that big unit that Overwatch is reasonably effective into stuff that's not durable. So like in the mirror match, or into something like Drakari, Space Elves do not want to be a small but potent unit of Space Elves does not want to be overwatched by 10 Hawks and Baharroth. But this is a unit that you need to play conservative with. And the other way to think about it is if you're running it in combination with other stuff, you can keep it alive by doing so much damage to one part of your opponent's army that they don't have the resources left to hit back. So I've talked in some of my other unit focus videos about having a run with scissors battle group where you have a bunch of Space Elves that sort of operate independently of the rest of your army and can be very quick and can suddenly show up out of nowhere on one of your opponent's flanks and do such overwhelming damage to that part of your opponent's army that your opponent doesn't have the tools to respond. So like if you have the unit of Warp Spiders, potentially with the Phoenix Lord, or not, just with the Exarch with the Arm Blades or whatever, and you have the 10 Hawks and the Walker in reserve to provide the additional AP, and you have some super fast Howling Banshees that could jump out of a Wave Serpent in your midfield and run onto one side of the field where you're making your big play. Or you have some Shining Spears, and Shroud Runners are good, high rate of fire, strip cover. If you have enough elves making a play on one part of the field, maybe the way you keep this unit alive and the rest of them is to just chew up the enemy in that one place and then look really carefully at the angles. And this will take trial and error. If you are new to Space Elves, or even more, if you're new to 40k, and the first couple of times you try Baharroth and 10 Swooping Hawks, they die on turn 1, or turn 2. It doesn't mean that it's a bad unit. It means that it's challenging to play. It's a souped up sports car. It goes really fast. But if you're not accustomed to it, you can smash right through the guardrail and end up in the reservoir, cutting your seatbelt with that seatbelt cutter window smashy thing your dad got you because he saw it on an infomercial. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're not actually sponsoring. They're not a co-sponsor for this video. Seatbelt cutty window smashery people. But Space Elves can be like that. This unit's super cool. If you don't have success with it right away, don't give up. And I think when you do get the hang of it, you're really going to love it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with just running basic units of 5 Hawks as scoring tools that also provide anti-light infantry and chip damage. That's a super useful tool. And the ability to gang up with multiple units of Hawks of any size with the grenade pack ability, and then also throw a grenade to just spam mortal wounds, I think might actually be some of the most powerful mortal wound spam in the game. Again, like I think when people were running the 30 Hawk builds, In part, it was because you could put an average of, with the grenade stratagem also, for 1 CP, you could pick something and put 18 mortal wounds on it before you did anything else, which is crazy. Okay, that's what I've got. I'll be back again this week with some videos that are not expressly about tactics. Some of you even like those other ones best. In the meantime, if you have your own thoughts about how best to use Hawks or the Phoenix Lord, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. If you want to say, I downloaded Adept Roll, or I use the Magnet Baron's magnets, cool. My sponsors like that. Also, it helps my algorithm. And if you just want to say hello or tell me what the first aspect warriors you ever purchased were, feel free to do that too. Okay, back again soon with something new. Take care. Bye.